Black woman accused of causing turbulence. Her shocking response changes everything in seconds. Imagine being humiliated in front of everyone on a flight. Stay tuned to Dark Stories to see how she turns the tables. In an ordinary flight, a storm was brewing, not in the skies, but in the hearts of those on board. A woman, quiet and dignified, becomes the center of unwarranted accusations. Her crime? Simply existing where others believe she didn't belong. What unfolds next exposes the deep cracks in a system built on prejudice. But here's the twist. This woman isn't just any passenger, she's someone who holds the power to change everything. What if one act of injustice could rewrite an entire industry? Keep watching Dark Stories to find out. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. If you love inspiring stories of resilience and justice, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Your support helps us share these impactful stories with even more people. Now, let's get into it. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as passengers settled into their seats, some flipping through magazines while others scrolled on their phones. Angela Hamilton sat in first class, her leather-bound journal open in her lap, pen poised over a fresh page. She loved the serenity of flights, the rare hours where no one could call, no one could email, and the world seemed to pause above the clouds. Today, however, the peace she sought felt elusive. From the corner of her eye, Angela noticed the flight attendant, a slim woman with sharp, calculating eyes, casting glances her way. Angela dismissed it at first. She was used to being watched, especially when occupying spaces people like her were rarely expected to belong. First class was no exception. As the plane ascended, mild turbulence began to rattle the overhead compartments. Angela tucked her pen into the journal's spine and gripped the armrests lightly. She noticed a few other passengers shift uncomfortably, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Turbulence was a common occurrence, at least that's what she told herself. The first real sign of trouble came when the flight attendant returned, her smile tight and forced. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice saccharine yet condescending. "Is everything all right?" Angela blinked, confused. "Yes, why do you ask?" The flight attendant's gaze flicked over Angela's tailored suit and the expensive watch on her wrist before settling on her face. "You seemed uneasy, just checking if you're comfortable." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but heavy. Angela had encountered this tone before, the thinly veiled suggestion that her presence was somehow unsettling. She smiled politely, a mask she had perfected over years of navigating these moments. "I'm perfectly fine, thank you." The woman hesitated, as if searching for a flaw in Angela's response. Before retreating to the galley, Angela turned back to her journal, but the tension lingered, coiling in her chest like a spring. Minutes later, the turbulence grew stronger. The cabin lights flickered briefly, and a few passengers gasped. Angela remained calm, accustomed to the unpredictable nature of flying. Yet, from the front of the cabin, she noticed the flight attendant speaking hurriedly to the pilot, who had cracked the cockpit door open. Her instincts prickled. The turbulence subsided as quickly as it began, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the rough air. We've adjusted our altitude, and the rest of the flight should be smooth." Relieved murmurs rippled through the cabin. Angela resumed her writing, determined to brush off the earlier oddities, but her tranquility was shattered moments later when the cockpit door opened fully, and the pilot himself strode into the cabin. His eyes scanned the rows until they landed on her. "You," he said, pointing directly at Angela. She froze, stunned. "Excuse me?" "You've been causing disruptions," he continued, his voice loud enough to turn every head in first class. "Your behavior is making other passengers uncomfortable." Angela's stomach dropped, the weight of all eyes in the cabin pressing down on her, suffocating. "I don't understand," she said carefully. "I haven't done anything." The pilot crossed his arms, his stance exuding authority. "We've received complaints about your aggressive demeanor." The absurdity of the accusation left her momentarily speechless. Aggressive, she had barely spoken a word since boarding. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Angela said, keeping her tone measured. "I've been sitting here quietly." A murmur swept through the cabin, passengers whispering to one another. Some looked at Angela with curiosity, others with suspicion. Her chest tightened. She had worked her entire life to rise above the stereotypes that followed her like shadows, yet here she was, being reduced to one in front of a captive audience. "Ma'am," the pilot said, his voice hardening, "if you can't comply, I'll have to move you to a different seat for everyone's safety." Safety, the word cut through her like a blade, loaded with unspoken prejudice. Angela squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm not moving," she said firmly. "I paid for this seat just like everyone else." The pilot's jaw tightened, his face reddening. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have no choice but to involve security when we land. Angela's hands trembled, but she refused to let them see her falter. Do what you need to do, she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotion swirling inside her. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The pilot glared at her for a moment longer before turning on his heel and retreating to the cockpit. The flight attendant lingered briefly, her lips twitching into a smirk before following him. Angela sank back into her seat, her heart pounding around her. The whispers grew louder, the weight of judgment from her fellow passengers pressing down like a physical force. She closed her journal, no longer able to focus. The rest of the flight stretched ahead, an unbearable eternity. As the plane flew on, Angela stared out the window, the clouds below a stark reminder of her isolation. She had worked so hard to rise above, but this felt different, sharper, crueler. She didn't know it yet, but the turbulence in her heart was about to ignite a storm far greater than anyone on that flight could imagine. The minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Angela kept her gaze fixed out the window, watching the endless expanse of clouds, but her reflection stared back at her in the glass, a mask of calm that barely concealed the fire building within. Her fingers tightened around the armrests, knuckles whitening as she fought to maintain composure. The murmurs in the cabin grew louder, like the faint buzzing of a swarm, impossible to ignore. More than once, Angela's ears picked up fragments of conversations, speculative whispers, disapproving tones, and even an outright chuckle from a row behind her. Must have done something to upset them, a man muttered to his seatmate. Can you believe the nerve? Came a woman's reply. First class isn't for everyone. Angela's stomach churned. She wanted to turn around, to confront them, but she knew better. Any move she made would be scrutinized, twisted to fit the narrative already forming in their minds, the narrative of an aggressive black woman who didn't know her place. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man in a business suit shot her a glance before quickly averting his eyes. He shifted uncomfortably, as if her mere presence was an inconvenience. A young woman a few seats back wasn't as subtle. She leaned over to her companion, whispering just loud enough for Angela to hear. I heard she was causing the turbulence or something, like arguing with the staff. The lie stung, but Angela bit her tongue. She refused to engage, knowing it would only fuel the fire. Instead, she pulled out her phone, discreetly recording the ambient sounds around her, the whispers, the judgmental sighs. It wasn't much, but it was something, a record of the hostility she was enduring. As the flight progressed, the flight attendant returned, her steps deliberate as she approached Angela's row. She avoided eye contact, placing a tray of refreshments on the seat next to Angela. Without a word. No offer of service, no polite inquiry, just a silent dismissal. Angela's blood boiled, but she remained composed, thanking the woman softly despite the slight. The attendant hesitated for a split second, surprise flickering in her eyes, before moving on. Angela's mind raced. What had she done to deserve this? Nothing, she knew deep down. It wasn't about her actions, it was about who she was, a successful black woman in a space where she didn't belong. The realization hardened her resolve. She wasn't just going to endure this, she was going to fight back. But how? The answer came as the plane began its descent. Angela's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. Board meeting rescheduled to tomorrow, major acquisition on the table. A small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. For the first time since the ordeal began, Angela felt a spark of empowerment. She wasn't powerless. In fact, she held more power than anyone on this flight could imagine. As the wheels touched down, the cabin erupted in the usual flurry of activity, passengers unbuckling, grabbing bags, eager to disembark. Angela remained seated, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The pilot emerged from the cockpit once more, his eyes scanning the cabin. Until they locked onto hers. He approached, his voice low but firm. Ma'am, security will escort you off the plane, please cooperate. Angela met his gaze evenly, her voice calm. That won't be necessary. I'll handle this myself. The pilot frowned, confusion flashing across his face, but he didn't press further. As the other passengers filed out, casting curious glances her way, Angela gathered her belongings with deliberate slowness. She stepped off the plane last, her head held high, the weight of the ordeal still heavy on her shoulders. But as she walked through the terminal, her phone in hand, she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The airport terminal buzzed with activity, travelers rushing to their gates, announcements echoing overhead. Angela Hamilton moved through the crowd with purpose, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She pulled out her phone, dialing a familiar number. Marcus, she said when her lawyer answered, I need you to look into something for me. Flight 237, Horizon Airlines. I was just on it, and there's an issue. She recounted the incident briefly, her voice steady but laced with quiet fury. Marcus listened, his responses sharp and professional. I'll get on it right away, Angela, send me any details you have. As she hung up, another call came in, this one from her business partner, Elena. Angela, the deal is heating up. Horizon Airlines is desperate. Their stock is plummeting after that PR disaster last month. We could acquire them for a steal. Angela paused, a spark igniting in her eyes. Tell me more. Elena outlined the details. Horizon was vulnerable, ripe for a takeover. Angela's company, Hamilton Enterprises, had the capital and the vision to turn it around, but now, after what she just endured, the opportunity felt personal. Let's move forward, Angela said, her tone decisive. I want full control. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Angela boarded a private jet back to her headquarters, her mind racing with plans. By the time she landed, her team was assembled in the conference room, ready to execute. The acquisition was swift, negotiations fueled by Horizon's desperation and Angela's determination. Within days, the deal was sealed. Hamilton Enterprises now owned Horizon Airlines, and Angela Hamilton was its new CEO. The news spread like wildfire. Media outlets buzzed with the story. Billionaire businesswoman acquires airline after in-flight discrimination. Social media exploded, hashtags trending as people shared their own stories of bias in the skies. Angela's phone rang nonstop, interviews, congratulations, and even apologies from Horizon's former executives, but she wasn't done yet. Her first order of business, a thorough review of the airline staff, starting with the crew of Flight 237. The pilot, Captain Harlan, was called into a meeting. He entered the room confidently, but his demeanor shifted when he saw Angela seated at the head of the table. You, he stammered, recognition dawning. Miss Hamilton, Angela corrected, her voice cool. Or should I say, CEO Hamilton. Harlan's face paled as the reality set in. Angela laid out the facts, the incident report, witness statements, and video footage from passengers who had recorded the confrontation. Your actions were unacceptable, she said. They don't align with the values of this airline, not anymore. Harlan tried to defend himself, stumbling over excuses about protocol and passenger safety, but Angela cut him off. This isn't about protocol. It's about prejudice, and there's no place for that here. With a stroke of her pen, she signed his termination papers. The flight attendant who had smirked during the ordeal faced the same fate. Angela didn't stop there. She implemented sweeping changes, mandatory bias training for all staff, revised policies on passenger treatment, and a new focus on diversity in hiring. The airline's reputation began to shift, slowly but surely. Passengers noticed the difference: friendlier service, inclusive ads, and a commitment to equality. Angela's story became a beacon of hope, inspiring others to speak out against injustice, and through it all, she remained grounded, her journal always close at hand, a reminder of where her journey began. In the end, what started as a moment of humiliation became a catalyst for change. Angela Hamilton didn't just buy an airline, she transformed it, and in doing so, she proved that resilience, paired with power, can move mountains. The conference room at Hamilton Enterprises hummed with focused energy. Angela Hamilton sat at the head of the long mahogany table, surrounded by her executive team. Charts and reports were spread out before them, detailing the integration of Horizon Airlines into their portfolio. The rebranding is key, Angela said, her voice steady and commanding. We need to communicate that Horizon is no longer the airline it once was. It's about inclusivity, respect, and excellence. Her chief marketing officer, Javier, nodded, tapping his tablet. We've drafted a campaign, New Horizons for All. It highlights diverse passengers and staff, with your story as the centerpiece, if you're comfortable with that. Angela considered it for a moment. Yes, use it, not for me, but for the message it sends. As the meeting progressed, Angela's phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. Captain Harlan is requesting a meeting, says it's urgent. Angela's lips pressed into a thin line. She had expected this. Schedule it for tomorrow, I'll hear him out. The next day, Harlan entered her office, hat in hand, his former arrogance replaced by a look of desperation. Miss Hamilton, he began, I wanted to apologize. I was wrong, I let my biases cloud my judgment, please, give me another chance. Angela studied him, her expression unreadable. An apology is a start, Captain, but actions speak louder than words. You've lost the trust of this airline, and mine. Harlan's shoulders slumped as he left, the door closing softly behind him. Angela turned to her window, overlooking the city skyline. She had no regrets. This was about building something better. Meanwhile, the changes at Horizon were taking effect. Staff underwent intensive training, learning to recognize and combat implicit biases. Passengers reported positive experiences, with social media buzzing about the New Horizon. One viral post read, "Flew Horizon today, felt seen and respected for the first time, thank you," at Angela Hamilton. Angela's influence extended beyond the airline. She partnered with advocacy groups, funding programs to combat discrimination in travel. Her story inspired legislation, with lawmakers proposing bills to protect passengers from bias, but challenges remained. A few holdouts in the staff resisted the changes, grumbling about political correctness. Angela addressed them in a company-wide memo. "This isn't politics. It's humanity. If you can't align with our values, this isn't the place for you." Resignations followed, but so did applications from diverse, talented individuals eager to join a forward-thinking company. As months passed, Horizon's profits soared, proving that doing good was good for business. Angela stood on the tarmac, watching a plane take off, a sense of accomplishment washing over her. She had turned turbulence into triumph, prejudice into progress, and she was just getting started. The boardroom was alive with anticipation as Angela Hamilton presented her vision for the future of Horizon Airlines. Her projections glowed on the screen behind her, outlining ambitious goals, expanded routes, upgraded fleets, and a commitment to sustainability. But the core of her presentation was the human element. "Our success isn't measured just in profits," Angela said, her voice resonant. "It's in the lives we impact, the barriers we break." The board members nodded, impressed. Point 1, an older gentleman with a skeptical brow, raised his hand. "Ms. Hamilton, these diversity initiatives, how do we ensure they don't alienate our traditional customer base?" Angela met his gaze evenly. "Diversity doesn't alienate, it enriches. By embracing all passengers, we expand our base, not shrink it. The data supports it." She clicked to the next slide, showing rising customer satisfaction scores since the changes. The skeptic leaned back, convinced. As the meeting wrapped, Angela's phone vibrated, an email from a major news outlet requesting an interview. "Your story is inspiring change across industries," it read. Angela smiled faintly. She had become a symbol, but she remained focused on the work. Later that week, Angela visited a training session for new hires. The room was diverse, men and women of various backgrounds, all eager to learn. She shared her experience on Flight 237, not as a victim, but as a catalyst. "What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone," she said. "Your role is to ensure it doesn't." The trainees listened intently, one young woman raising her hand. "How do we handle difficult passengers without bias?" Angela nodded approvingly. "Start with empathy, question your assumptions, and remember, every passenger deserves respect." The session ended with applause, the new hires inspired. Angela left feeling hopeful. The seeds she had planted were taking root. Back in her office, Angela opened her journal, reflecting on the journey from humiliated passenger to industry leader. Her path had been fraught with challenges, but each obstacle had forged her stronger. As she wrote, her assistant knocked. "Ms. Hamilton, the summit invitations are out, responses are pouring in." The airline summit Angela had proposed was becoming a reality. Leaders from across the industry gathering to discuss reformed IT was her boldest move yet, a platform to drive systemic change. Angela closed her journal, ready for the next chapter. The turbulence had passed, but the flight was far from over, and she was at the controls. Angela Hamilton stood before a packed auditorium at the Global Aviation Summit, the spotlight warm on her face. Leaders from airlines worldwide filled the seats, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. "Ladies and gentlemen," Angela began, her voice clear and confident, "the airline industry is at a crossroads. We can continue down a path marred by discrimination and inequality, or we can chart a new course, one of inclusion and respect." She shared data, stories, and her own experience, weaving them into a compelling call to action. "It's not enough to apologize after the fact. We must prevent these incidents before they occur." The audience listened, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. During the Q&A, a CEO from a rival airline stood. "Ms. Hamilton, implementing these changes costs money. How do we justify it to shareholders?" Angela smiled. "By showing them the cost of inaction, lost customers, lawsuits, damaged reputations. Investing in equity isn't an expense, it's an investment in our future." Applause rippled through the room. By the summit's end, several airlines pledged to adopt similar reforms. A joint statement was drafted, committing to industry-wide standards. Angela's vision was gaining momentum. Back home, Angela received a letter, not an email, but a handwritten note. It was from the young woman on Flight 237 who had whispered about her. "I was wrong," it read. "Your strength opened my eyes, thank you for showing me a better way." Angela folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her journal. It was a small victory, but profound change wasn't just about policies, It was about hearts and minds. As Angela prepared for her next flight, this time as the owner, she felt a profound sense of purpose. The skies were clearer now, the horizon brighter, and she was determined to keep it that way. The backlash came swiftly. As Angela had anticipated, conservative media outlets painted her as a woke warrior, destroying tradition. Protests erupted outside Horizon's headquarters, signs reading, "Bring back our airline." Social media trolls flooded her mentions with vitriol, but Angela remained unshaken. She addressed the controversy in a press conference, flanked by her team. "Change is uncomfortable," she said, her voice steady. "But stagnation is dangerous. We won't back down from doing what's right." Support poured in too. Celebrities, activists, and everyday people rallied behind her. A GoFundMe for bias training programs raised millions. Horizon stock, after an initial dip, began to climb as conscious consumers chose them over competitors. Internally, Angela faced resistance. A group of veteran pilots petitioned against the new policies, claiming they were divisive. Angela met with them personally. "I understand your concerns," she said. "But these policies protect everyone, including you, from unfair treatment." Some were swayed, others left, but the airline emerged stronger, its culture shifting toward unity. One evening, Angela received a call from an unexpected source, the former flight attendant from Flight 237. "I lost my job," the woman said, her voice trembling. "But I see now why. I'm sorry." Angela paused, choosing her words carefully. "Apology accepted. Use this as a chance to grow." The conversation lingered in Angela's mind, a reminder that redemption was possible. As the year drew to a close, Horizon Airlines was named Most Inclusive Carrier by a leading travel magazine. Angela accepted the award, dedicating it to every passenger who has ever felt unseen. Her journey had transformed not just an airline, but an industry, and in the process, she had found her true calling, a force for justice, one flight at a time. Angela Hamilton's office overlooked the bustling airport, planes taking off and landing in a rhythmic dance. She reviewed the latest reports, customer satisfaction at an all-time high, diversity hires up 40%, incidents of bias down dramatically. The changes were working, but Angela knew the fight wasn't over and new challenges arose daily: supply chain issues, economic pressures, evolving regulations. She tackled them with the same determination that had brought her here. One afternoon, her assistant buzzed in. "Miss Hamilton, there's a group here to see you, advocates from the NAACP." Angela welcomed them warmly. They discussed partnering on a national campaign to address discrimination in travel. "Your story has inspired us," their leader said. "Together, we can amplify it." Angela agreed, excited by the collaboration. As the meeting ended, one advocate lingered. "How do you stay so resilient?" she asked. Angela smiled. "By remembering why I started. For every person who feels out of place, I keep going." That night, Angela attended a gala honoring women in business. She wore a stunning gown, her presence commanding the room. In her speech, she shared a quote from her journal: "Turbulence tests us, but it also lifts us higher." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Later, mingling with guests, Angela met a young black entrepreneur. "You're my role model," the woman said. "I want to buy my own company one day." Angela placed a hand on her shoulder. "You will, and when you do, pay it forward." As the evening wound down, Angela stepped outside, the cool air refreshing. She looked up at the stars, feeling connected to something larger. Her journey had been turbulent, but it had led her here, to a place of power, purpose, and peace, and she was ready for whatever came next. The proposal for industry reform landed on Angela's desk like a challenge. She had drafted it herself, outlining mandatory bias training, diverse hiring quotas, and passenger rights protections. Now, it was time to pitch it to the Airline Association Board. The virtual meeting connected executives from across the country. Angela presented with poise, her slides crisp and data-driven. "This isn't just about compliance," she concluded. "It's about reshaping the culture." Susan Bradley, the advocacy leader, nodded. "Agreed, but reshaping culture means resistance. We need a strategy for dealing with backlash, internally from staff who might resist change, and externally from passengers who feel threatened by progress." Angela's lips pressed into a thoughtful line. "Resistance is inevitable," she acknowledged, "but so is progress. We focus on the data, on measurable outcomes. If we show that these initiatives improve passenger satisfaction, reduce incidents, and strengthen public trust, the resistance will have less ground to stand on." Greg Williams, the airline executive who had been skeptical in the initial meeting, spoke up. "We've started reviewing our internal incident reports," he said, his tone more cooperative than before. "The numbers are sobering. I can't deny the need for change anymore." Angela leaned forward slightly, meeting his gaze through the screen. "That's where real leadership begins, Greg. Acknowledging the problem is the first step. Now, let's focus on solving it." Later that evening, Angela found herself scrolling through the comments on her social media accounts. Her initial post about the incident on Flight 237 had continued to gain traction, sparking conversations far beyond her usual circles. Amid the outpouring of support were stories, hundreds of them, from people who had faced similar experiences. A young woman described being asked to leave a first-class seat because staff assumed she had boarded the wrong cabin. A black family recounted being removed from a flight after a minor disagreement with another passenger. Each story added fuel to Angela's determination. One comment caught her eye: "Thank you for speaking up. People like me don't always have the platform to fight back, but you're fighting for all of us." Angela stared at the words for a long moment, feeling their weight. She had always understood the power of representation, but this was something deeper. Her fight had become a symbol for others, a beacon in the storm. Of the next morning, Angela attended a televised interview with the Morning Report. She had prepared meticulously, knowing the questions would likely veer into personal territory, but she was ready. Her story was a tool now, a means to shed light on a larger issue. The studio was bright and bustling, with crew members adjusting lights and cameras. As Angela settled into her seat across from the host, Rachel Conrad, Rachel greeted her warmly, but Angela could sense the underlying seriousness of the interview ahead. "Angela," Rachel began, her tone professional, "your experience on Flight 237 has sparked a national conversation about bias and systemic inequality in the airline industry. How has it felt to see this response?" Angela took a moment to collect her thoughts, her posture poised but relaxed. "It's been overwhelming in many ways," she said, "but it's also been inspiring. This isn't just about me. It's about the countless people who have faced similar treatment and haven't had the opportunity to be heard. Their stories are what drive me." Rachel nodded, her expression empathetic. "Your proposal for reform has been praised by some and criticized by others. What do you say to those who argue that these changes are unnecessary or too costly?" Angela's gaze was steady. "I'd ask them to consider the cost of doing nothing. Discrimination doesn't just hurt individuals, it damages businesses, erodes public trust, and perpetuates inequality. Investing in reform isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do." After the interview, Angela returned to her office, where Monica was waiting with updates. "The interview is already trending," Monica said, showing Angela her phone. "And we've received emails from 3 more airlines expressing interest in joining the initiative." Angela allowed herself a brief smile. "That's good, but we can't lose momentum. Keep pushing the proposal forward, and schedule another meeting with the advocacy leaders. I want to hear their feedback on the next steps." Monica nodded, already taking notes. "On it, anything else?" Angela glanced at her journal, where she had scribbled a new idea earlier that morning. "Yes. Let's start planning a summit, an industry-wide event to officially launch the initiative. We'll bring everyone to the table and make this a public commitment." Monica raised an eyebrow. "A summit, that's ambitious." Angela's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Change always is." That night, as Angela sat by the window of her bedroom, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The journey ahead was daunting, but it was also necessary. She thought of the people who had reached out to her, the stories they had shared, and the hope they had placed in her. Angela closed her eyes, letting the steady rhythm of her breathing anchor her. She had always believed in the power of resilience, in the ability to turn adversity into strength, and now, more than ever, she was determined to use that strength to build something lasting. The storm that began on Flight 237 had grown into a movement, and Angela Hamilton was at its helm. She was ready to navigate the turbulence, to weather the resistance, and to lead others toward a horizon where justice and equality weren't just ideals, but realities. Angela found herself back at the airport one evening, waiting to board a flight for a speaking engagement. As she approached the check-in counter, she noticed a woman in uniform, a flight attendant, watching her with a nervous expression. The woman stepped forward hesitantly. "Miss Hamilton," she said, her voice tentative, "I just wanted to say thank you. Because of your work, I've learned so much about how my actions can affect others. I'm sorry for what you went through, but I'm grateful for what you've done." Angela's heart swelled with emotion. Though she kept her composure, she extended her hand, her smile warm. "Thank you for saying that. Change starts with understanding, and you're part of that change." The attendant nodded, her shoulders relaxing as she stepped aside to let Angela pass. As Angela settled into her first-class seat, she opened her journal, flipping to a blank page. She wrote a single line, Flight 237, the turbulence wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The engines roared to life, and as the plane ascended, Angela looked out at the clouds, a sense of peace washing over her. She had faced the storm, harnessed its power, and turned it into a force for justice. Angela Hamilton wasn't just a passenger anymore, she was a pioneer, charting a course toward a better world, and the journey was far from over. And so, what started as an act of injustice became the spark for change. Angela didn't just rise above the prejudice she faced, she turned it into an opportunity to rewrite the rules for everyone. Her story is a powerful reminder that even in the face of adversity, one person's courage can create ripples that inspire transformation. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Dark Stories for more stories of resilience, justice, and hope. Together, let's keep these conversations alive. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.